My husband kissed his mistress in front of me, so I took his $10 million and divorced him. I watched my husband of 40 years press his lips against my niece's mouth at our anniversary party. And in that crystalline moment of betrayal, I felt something inside me die and simultaneously be reborn. The champagne glass slipped from my trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor of our mansion's ballroom, but the sound was swallowed by the orchestra's romantic melody. Nobody noticed. Nobody saw. Except me. And that's when I knew they wanted me to see. They wanted me to break. What they didn't know was that I had already started to suspect, already started to dig, already started to plan. But seeing it with my own eyes, witnessing the man I built an empire with kiss the girl I raised like a daughter, that transformed suspicion into certainty and grief into something far more dangerous, clarity. My name is Margaret Whitmore, and am 65 years old. For 4 decades, I stood beside Richard Whitmore, not behind him but beside him, as we transformed a modest oil exploration company into a multi-billion-dollar energy conglomerate. My family's land in West Texas held the oil. My grandfather's dying wish placed those mineral rights in my hands. But it was Richard's charm, Richard's connections, Richard's name that opened doors in boardrooms where old money still didn't trust women. So we became partners. Equals, I thought. I signed papers, attended galas, played the devoted wife while simultaneously serving as the company's silent majority shareholder. The fortune we built, it was mine by inheritance, ours by marriage, but in every legal sense, mine by right. But standing there in my Valentino gown, watching my niece Sarah's hand slide possessively down my husband's chest, I realized with horrifying certainty that somewhere along the way, I had stopped paying attention to the details that mattered. The board meetings I'd gradually stopped attending because Richard insisted I deserved to rest. The documents I signed while distracted by charity work, trusting my husband's explanations. The tea he'd bring me every evening, always so attentive, so caring, right before I'd feel that familiar fog settle over my thoughts. The doctor's appointments where physicians I'd never met before diagnosed me with early onset dementia, despite my protests that I felt perfectly clear-minded in the mornings, before Richard's tea, before Richard's concerned hovering. The party continued around me. 200 guests, Houston's elite, celebrating 4 decades of the Whitmore marriage. My daughter Catherine was circulating with her husband, showing off photos of my granddaughter Emma who was away at Stanford. Friends from the country club complimented the ice sculptures, the string quartet, the 5-tier anniversary cake. Richard's business partners congratulated him on his enduring success. And there, in the corner near the French doors leading to the garden, Richard had his hand on Sarah's lower back, guiding her outside with the casual intimacy of longtime lovers. My niece. My sister's daughter. The girl I'd paid to put through Yale, hired at our company, mentored like my own child. I bent down slowly, my knees protesting, and picked up a shard of the broken champagne glass. The crystal edge cut into my palm, a bright line of red, and the pain felt clarifying. Real. I wrapped the cut in my napkin and straightened, and that's when I noticed Emma standing near the staircase, her phone in her hand, her face pale. My granddaughter wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be in California, studying for finals. But there she was, 19 years old, staring at her phone screen with an expression of absolute horror. Our eyes met across the crowded room. Emma's mouth formed words I couldn't hear, but I understood. Grandma, we need to talk. She tilted her head toward the library, and I nodded. My legs felt unsteady as I made my way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and air kisses, playing the role I'd perfected over 4 decades. The devoted wife. The gracious hostess. The woman who had everything. The library door closed behind us, muffling the party noise. Emma stood by my late father's desk, her hands shaking as she held out her phone. She was crying, tears streaming down her young face, and I felt a fierce protectiveness surge through me even as dread coiled in my stomach. Grandma, she said, her voice breaking. Grandma, I found something. I came home early to surprise you for the anniversary, and I was using the computer in Uncle Richard's study to print my boarding pass, and his laptop was open, and I saw she thrust the phone at me. On the screen, a video was paused. I recognized Richard's study, the expensive leather chairs, the view of our Houston skyline. I pressed play, and my husband's voice filled the small space. "We need to speed this up," Richard was saying to someone off camera. "The doctors are playing along with the dementia diagnosis, but Margaret's sharper than we thought. Yesterday she questioned why the dosage increased. We can't give her time to get suspicious." Then Sarah walked into frame, wearing one of my Hermes scarves, settling into Richard's lap with the ease of frequent practice. "Don't worry, baby," my niece purred. "I checked her tea this afternoon, double dose. By tonight she won't remember her own name. Another few months of this, and we'll have her declared incompetent. Then everything transfers to you as her spouse and medical proxy, and we can finally stop pretending to care about the old hag." Richard laughed, actually laughed, and kissed her neck. "I've waited 20 years for this," he said. 20 years of pretending to love that dried up old woman. But it was worth it. That oil inheritance, those mineral rights, do you know what they're worth now? Conservative estimate, $3 billion. And all of it will be ours once she signs the final transfer papers. The lawyers confirmed it yesterday. Sarah turned to face the camera, her eyes gleaming with something predatory. "And once we have control, we stage the accident. Make it look like she wandered off during one of her confused episodes, fell into the pool, tragic dementia victim. No one will question it, not with all these doctors' reports we've built up. We'll be the grieving family, and you'll inherit everything as the surviving spouse. Her kids get nothing. That prenup you made her sign 20 years ago was genius." There was more, so much more, but I couldn't hear it over the roaring in my ears. Emma was sobbing, apologizing for not telling me the moment she found the recordings, but she'd been so scared, so confused, she'd spent the past 3 hours in a coffee shop watching file after file, trying to understand what she was seeing. Richard's laptop, she explained, had been running screen recording software for months, some security feature had enabled and forgotten about. Everything was captured. Every conversation, every scheme, every cruel laugh at my expense. "How much is there?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "How much evidence?" "Hundreds of hours, Grandma. I uploaded it all to a secure cloud drive. There are videos of them in your bed, laughing about drugging your tea. There are spreadsheets showing how they've been siphoning money from the company accounts. There are emails to doctors, offering them payoffs to falsify your medical records. There's even," Emma's voice dropped to a whisper, "there's even a discussion about staging your suicide if the pool accident doesn't work. Making it look like you couldn't handle the dementia diagnosis." I sat down heavily in my father's old chair, the same chair where Head told me never to trust anyone completely in business, to always keep control of what was mine. Head died when I was 30, but his voice echoed in my memory now, clear as crystal. "You're a Thornton, Margaret. We're oil people, survivor people. Don't let anyone take what's yours." Emma knelt beside me, gripping my hands. "Grandma, we need to call the police. This is fraud, attempted murder." "No," I said quietly. "Not yet. Not the police." She looked at me with confusion, but I was already thinking, already planning. Because Richard had made one critical error in all his careful scheming. Head assumed I was weak. Head assumed that the woman had negotiated drilling rights with Texas wildcatters, had stared down Saudi oil ministers, had built a fortune through grit and determination. Head assumed that woman had been extinguished by age and trust and devotion. Head assumed wrong. "I need you to do something for me, Emma. I need you to download every file, every video, every piece of evidence onto multiple drives. Then I need you to go back to the party, act normal, give me time to think. Can you do that?" She nodded, wiping her tears. "What are you going to do, Grandma?" I stood, straightening my gown, checking my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me was still the elegant, silver-haired society wife everyone expected, but underneath, something fundamental had shifted. I'm going to take back what's mine. I'm going to remind my husband exactly who he married. And I'm going to make sure Sarah learns that family loyalty is sacred, and betraying it comes with a price. The party was winding down when I returned to the ballroom. Richard was at the bar, accepting congratulations, his arm around Sarah's waist as if she were just his helpful niece, nothing more. I watched them from across the room, and this time I saw everything I'd missed. The casual touches. The private smiles. The way her hand lingered on his shoulder. How long, I wondered. How long had this been happening under my nose? Catherine found me near the cake, her face flushed with champagne and happiness. "Oh Mom, wasn't tonight perfect?" She gushed. "You and Dad are such an inspiration. 40 years of marriage, it's so rare these days. You two are proof that true love exists." "Yes, darling," I said, kissing her cheek. "We certainly are proof of something." I made my way to Richard, who greeted me with the same charming smile he'd used to woo me 4 decades ago. "There's my beautiful wife," he announced to his circle of admirers. 40 years, and she still takes my breath away. I let him kiss my cheek, let him pull me close, and I whispered in his ear just loud enough for him to hear, "I saw you. I saw everything. And you're going to regret the day you underestimated me." His body went rigid, but he kept smiling, kept playing the devoted husband. When the guests finally departed in the early morning hours, when the caterers had cleaned up and the musicians packed away their instruments, Richard found me in our bedroom. I was sitting at my vanity, removing my jewelry with steady hands. "What exactly did you see, Margaret?" His voice was controlled, but I heard the edge of panic. "Everything," I replied calmly. "But we'll discuss it in the morning. I'm tired. It's been such a long, revealing evening." I slept in the guest room that night, the first time in 40 years we'd spent apart under the same roof. I didn't sleep, though. I sat in the darkness, Emma's backup drive clutched in my hand, and I planned. By the time dawn broke over Houston, I knew exactly what I was going to do. The next morning, I didn't drink the tea Richard brought me. I poured it down the bathroom sink and watched the amber liquid swirl away, taking months of systematic poisoning with it. Within hours, the fog I'd been living in started to lift. My thoughts sharpened. My memory cleared. And I began to understand the full scope of what they'd done to me. I spent the next 3 days conducting my own investigation, using resources Richard didn't know I still had. My father's old attorney, Marcus Kellerman, was retired but still sharp at 82. I visited him at his downtown office, bringing Emma's evidence drives, and I watched his face darken with rage as he reviewed the files. "Margaret, this is criminal conspiracy," he said flatly. "Attempted murder, fraud, elder abuse. Richard could go to prison for decades. We need to contact the FBI immediately." "We will," I assured him. "But first, I need you to help me understand something. The papers I signed over the past year, the ones Richard said were just updates to our estate planning, what exactly did I sign?" Marcus spent 2 days with his team of lawyers, tracing documents, checking filings, unraveling the web Richard had woven. The news was devastating. Over the past 18 months, while I'd been systematically drugged and gaslit, I'd signed over nearly complete control of my oil inheritance to Richard. The mineral rights, the company shares, even the deed to our Houston mansion, everything was now in his name or in jointly controlled trusts where he had override authority. Legally, I'd given away $3 billion of my family's legacy. "But," Marcus said, and that single word made me look up with hope, "but all these signatures were obtained under duress and fraud. You were being systematically poisoned to impair your judgment. We have video evidence of the conspiracy. Any competent judge will nullify these transfers immediately. We'll get everything back, Margaret. Every last penny." "I don't want to nullify them," I said quietly. "Not yet." Marcus stared at me. "Margaret, what are you planning?" I smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I'm planning to teach Richard that taking something is very different from keeping it. and am planning to ensure that Sarah learns why you never, ever betray family. Over the next week, I became a different person. Or rather, I became myself again, the woman I'd been before marriage, and trust and love had softened my edges. I visited my personal banker, a woman named Victoria Chin who'd handled my private accounts for 20 years. The accounts Richard didn't know about. The ones my father had taught me to keep separate, always separate, because old oil money knows that you never put all your cards on the table. Mrs. Whitmore, Victoria said, reviewing my portfolio with surprise. I'd actually been concerned, you hadn't accessed these accounts in over a year. I was worried something had happened to you. Something did happen, I told her. But it's being corrected. Now, I need to make some transfers. Large ones. And I need them to be completely untraceable. Victoria had connections in the offshore banking world, the kind of connections that old Houston money cultivates quietly. Within 3 days, I'd moved $10 million from Richard's operating accounts I still technically had access to, accounts had kept in both our names for appearances, into a complex network of shell companies and offshore trusts. The paper trail was Byzantine, deliberately confusing, and it all led back to one name, Sarah Thornton, my niece. Then I hired a private investigator, a retired FBI agent named Marcus Stone who specialized in financial crimes. I paid him $50,000 in cash to create a comprehensive digital forensic report. But I didn't ask him to investigate Richard. I asked him to investigate Sarah. And I provided him with carefully curated evidence, real transactions mixed with manufactured ones, that painted a picture of embezzlement, money laundering, and corporate fraud. All pointing to my beloved niece as the mastermind. Mr. Stone spent a week building the case, unaware that he was constructing an elaborate frame. When he delivered his report, it was damning. According to his analysis, Sarah had been systematically stealing from Whitmore Energy for 3 years, using her position as junior vice president to authorize fraudulent payments, hide kickbacks, and funnel millions into offshore accounts. The report was detailed, professional, and completely believable. Mrs. Whitmore, Stone said gravely, you need to contact law enforcement immediately. This is serious financial crime. Your company could be liable for millions in damages if this becomes public. I will, I promised. Soon. But first, I have a charity gala to attend. Richard had been planning his annual charity benefit for months, the Whitmore Foundation Gala, Houston's most prestigious philanthropic event. 500 guests, every major donor in Texas, press coverage, and a keynote speech where Richard would announce a new $50 million initiative for children's hospitals. It was his signature event, the one that cemented his reputation as Houston's most generous businessman. Had been planning this gala since before he started poisoning me, never imagining that by the time it arrived, I would know everything. The week before the gala, Richard tried to have me committed. I discovered this when Catherine called, frantic and confused. Mom, she said, crying, Dad's lawyers contacted me. They say you're having severe mental episodes, that you're a danger to yourself, that you need immediate psychiatric care. They're asking me to sign commitment papers. They have doctors' reports saying you're in cognitive decline. I felt a cold fury settle over me. Catherine, I said calmly, don't sign anything. Meet me tomorrow for lunch at River Oaks Country Club. Come alone, tell no one, especially not your father. Can you do that? The next day, I showed Catherine everything. Every video, every email, every piece of evidence. I watched my daughter's face cycle through disbelief, horror, rage, and finally cold determination. When the last video ended, the one where Richard and Sarah discussed staging my suicide, Catherine was white with fury. I'm calling the police right now, she said, reaching for her phone. I stopped her hand gently. Not yet, darling. Soon, I promise. But first, I need your help with something. The gala is in 3 days. I need you to trust me for 3 more days. Can you do that? Catherine looked at me with her father's eyes but her grandfather's steel. What are you planning, Mom? "In planning," I said quietly, "to give Houston society an evening they'll never forget. And I'm going to make sure your father finally faces the consequences of underestimating the woman he married." The night of the gala arrived with typical Houston humidity, the kind that made diamonds sparkle with moisture and silk gowns cling uncomfortably. I dressed carefully in a stunning emerald Dior gown, applied my makeup with precision, and styled my silver hair into an elegant chignon. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the Margaret Whitmore that Houston society knew: graceful, refined, unthreatening. Perfect. Richard barely looked at me as we prepared to leave. Had been distant since our anniversary party, wary but not quite sure what I knew or what I planned. His lawyers had been frustrated by Catherine's refusal to sign commitment papers, but they were preparing to proceed without her consent, citing emergency circumstances. I had perhaps 24 hours before Richard would have me forcibly institutionalized. Which meant tonight had to be perfect. The gala was held at the Museum of Fine Arts, the contemporary wing transformed into an elegant ballroom. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, champagne towers, and a guest list that read like a who's who of Texas power. Senators, oil executives, tech billionaires, philanthropists, and society mavens, everyone who mattered was there, dressed in their finest, ready to celebrate Richard Whitmore's generosity. Sarah arrived on the arm of a minor celebrity, playing the beautiful young professional, charming and gracious. She was wearing a dress I recognized. It had been mine once, a vintage Chanel ID given her for her birthday 2 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was literally wearing my clothes while stealing my life. I circulated through the crowd, playing my role perfectly. I accepted compliments on the event, praised the foundation's work, and avoided the tea service with careful discretion. Emma was there, looking beautiful in a simple black gown, her phone discreetly recording everything as we'd planned. Catherine stayed close to me, her husband Tom running interference to keep Richard occupied. The evening progressed exactly as Richard had choreographed. Dinner at 8, silent auction at 9, awards ceremony at 9:30, and Richard's keynote speech at 10. I watched the clock, my heart beating steady and strong, no fog clouding my thoughts for the first time in a year. I felt sharp, focused, dangerous. At 9:45, Richard took the stage to thunderous applause. He looked distinguished in his tuxedo, silver-haired and confident, every inch the respected philanthropist. He began his speech about giving back, about responsibility, about the importance of caring for society's most vulnerable. The irony made my stomach turn. 10 minutes into his speech, I gave Emma the signal. She pulled out a small remote control, the one connected to the gala's audio-visual system, the one we'd paid the AV technician $10,000 to install. The massive screens behind Richard, meant to display heartwarming photos of children in hospitals, suddenly flickered and changed. And then, in crystal clear high definition on screens 20 feet tall, Richard's face appeared. But not the composed philanthropist face. The Richard from the laptop recordings, sitting in his study with Sarah on his lap, discussing how to speed up my drugging, how to steal my inheritance, how to stage my death. The ballroom went silent. 500 people froze, champagne glasses halfway to lips, conversations dying mid-sentence. Richard turned to look at the screens, and I watched the blood drain from his face as his own voice echoed through the museum. We staged the accident. Make it look like she wandered off during one of her confused episodes, fell into the pool, tragic dementia victim. Sarah's voice joined his on the recording, and once we have control, we make her disappear. No one will question it with all these doctors' reports. The next 20 minutes were the longest of my life. Emma had edited the footage masterfully, creating a highlight reel of betrayal. Richard and Sarah in bed, laughing about drugging me. Emails to corrupt doctors. Spreadsheets showing embezzled funds. Text messages calling me vile names. Video after video of two people I'd trusted, loved, and built a life with, casually discussing my murder as if they were planning a vacation. The Houston Chronicle Society reporter was recording. 2 senators stood with their mouths open. Oil executives I'd known for decades stared at the screens in horror. And Sarah tried to run, but Catherine and Tom blocked the exits, along with several other guests had caught on to what was happening. Richard stood frozen on stage, spotlit and exposed, as his entire carefully constructed reputation crumbled in real time. When the videos finally ended, the silence in the ballroom was absolute. I stood slowly, and all eyes turned to me. I walked to the stage with my head high, my steps measured and confident. Richard tried to speak, tried to explain, but no words came out. I took the microphone from his nerveless fingers and faced the crowd. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady and clear. "My name is Margaret Thornton Whitmore. Some of you have known me for 40 years. You've watched me build a company alongside my husband, raise my children, support this community. What you just witnessed is the truth of what my husband and my niece have been doing to me for the past 2 years. Systematically drugging me, stealing my inheritance, planning my murder, and they almost succeeded." I paused, letting the words sink in. Because I made the mistake of trusting completely. Of believing that love and loyalty mattered more than money. Of thinking that 40 years of partnership meant something. But hey race, what Richard and Sarah didn't know. I may be 65 years old, but I'm still a Thornton. And we Thorntons don't just survive, we thrive. So while they were planning my death, I was planning something else. I pulled out a folder, thick with documents, and held it up. This is a forensic accounting report prepared by retired FBI agent Marcus Stone. It details 3 years of embezzlement from Whitmore Energy Corporation. Millions of dollars stolen, laundered through offshore accounts, hidden in shell companies. The evidence is irrefutable. Sarah made a strangled sound from near the exit. I met her eyes across the ballroom and smiled. The primary suspect in this embezzlement scheme is Sarah Thornton, my niece. Every transaction traces back to her. Every shell company bears her digital fingerprints. And as of this morning, federal investigators have begun building their case. That wasn't entirely true. The investigators would begin tomorrow, once I handed them this manufactured evidence along with the real evidence of Richard's crimes. But Sarah didn't know that. She didn't know that the $10 million Richard thought had hidden safely was now sitting in accounts that pointed directly to her. She didn't know ID framed her as expertly as they'd tried to frame me as incompetent. As for my husband, I continued, turning to face Richard, who looked like he might vomit, the evidence of his crimes speaks for itself. Attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy. The FBI will be here shortly to take him into custody. I've cooperated fully with federal investigators, providing them with hundreds of hours of recorded evidence. Richard finally found his voice. "Margaret, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I cut him off. "I understand that you married me for my family's money. I understand that you've been planning to kill me for months. I understand that you made me sign over my inheritance while poisoning my tea with sedatives. But hey race, what you don't understand, Richard. You don't understand that taking something from me and keeping it are two very different things." I turned back to the crowd. "Everything my husband stole from me will be returned through the courts. Every signature I made under duress will be nullified. Every asset will revert to my control. And then," I paused for effect, "I'm going to use that fortune to establish a new foundation. The Margaret Thornton Foundation for Elder Abuse Prevention, because what happened to me happens to thousands of people every year. Elderly people, mostly women, who are systematically abused, defrauded, and sometimes murdered by people they trust. People they love. And I'm going to make sure it stops." The ballroom erupted. Applause mixed with shocked murmurs, cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. But I was already walking off the stage, my head high, my purpose clear. Catherine and Emma flanked me, and together we walked through the crowd toward the exit. Behind us, I heard Richard calling my name, heard security moving in, heard Sarah screaming about lies and frame-ups. But I didn't turn around. I kept walking, out of the museum, into the humid Houston night, into my new life. The FBI arrested Richard the next morning at our mansion. I wasn't there to see it. ID spent the night at Catherine's house, sleeping soundly for the first time in months. The charges were extensive: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, fraud, embezzlement, falsifying medical records. Marcus Kellerman's legal team had worked through the night, presenting federal prosecutors with an airtight case. Sarah was arrested 3 hours later at the airport, trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. The $10 million ID transferred to accounts in her name, combined with the forensic evidence Stone had compiled, made her look like the mastermind of an elaborate embezzlement scheme. Her protestations that she'd been framed fell on deaf ears. After all, the videos clearly showed her as Richard's willing accomplice in multiple crimes. The embezzlement charges were just the cherry on top. The story exploded across national news. Society husband's murder plot exposed. Oil heiress fights back against deadly scheme. The videos went viral, carefully edited versions that protected some privacy but showed enough to make the case crystal clear. My phone rang constantly: reporters, lawyers, old friends, women's advocacy groups, even a producer from 60 Minutes. Within a week, ID became an unlikely hero. A symbol of strength and resistance. A cautionary tale about trust and a triumph of justice. Speaking requests poured in from organizations focused on elder rights, financial abuse prevention, domestic violence. I accepted the invitation from TEDx Houston, breaking the silence on elder abuse. My talk, delivered 6 weeks after the gala, went viral with over 10 million views in the first month. But none of that mattered as much as the day I walked into the courthouse for the first hearing. Richard sat at the defense table, his expensive suit rumpled, his legendary charm extinguished. He looked old, defeated, nothing like the confident man ID married 40 years ago. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and I saw him start to speak, maybe to apologize, maybe to plead. I looked away. He didn't deserve my attention anymore. The legal proceedings took 6 months. Richard's lawyers tried everything, claiming the videos were doctored, arguing that I was indeed mentally incompetent, suggesting that Sarah had manipulated him. Nothing worked. The evidence was too extensive, too clear, too damning. In the end, Richard pleaded guilty to avoid a trial that would have been even more humiliating. He received 20 years for attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, and elder abuse. With his age and health issues, it was essentially a life sentence. Sarah's trial was separate but equally decisive. The embezzlement evidence, combined with her role in drugging me and planning my death, earned her 15 years in federal prison. Her Yale education, her promising career, her entire future, all destroyed by greed and betrayal. But the most satisfying moment came during the asset recovery proceedings. Judge Morrison, a stern woman in her 60s, had read every page of evidence, looked at Richard's lawyers with barely concealed disgust. Everything, she declared. Every asset acquired during the marriage, every property, every account, every stock, every piece of artwork, it all reverts to Mrs. Whitmore. The prenuptial agreement signed 20 years ago is void due to fraud.